Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DefDevice podcast. This is Dano Falk. I'm the founder and e-commerce consultant at DefDevice. And today I have a guest with me, Mr. John Romano. Welcome, Mr. John.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We met on LinkedIn, I guess, just a few weeks ago, and I was quite impressed with what you're doing with your business, which is called Disaster Central. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's quite a compelling name for a business, but I also like looking deeper into it. You're doing a lot of very important work for your community and for the people around you. Please tell us more about it.
That's correct, Dano. The inspiration for the organization at Disaster Central is largely, derived from my experiences from a disaster on the East Coast when I was lived on the Jersey Shore, and so there's a rich history there of myself working with disaster survivors, and for literally almost 3 years in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, and so that was the real inspiration of my founding Disaster Central, which is really defined as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, U.S. based.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what happened in the aftermath of this hurricane?
Well, it was one of the largest confluence of three storms that ever hit in the northern section of the East Coast of the U.S. And there were about 60 deaths, but the impact was really upon infrastructure and encompassed a 3-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and tremendous amount of damage. And at the time, I had worked for another nonprofit organization and was involved in the recovery and helping people not only rebuild their homes, but rebuild their lives. And it was a very rich experience for me, and dealing with people one-on-one, and performing workshops and being in direct service to people who have been impacted by a disaster. And so it was both fulfilling and enriching, but it also is very instructive as to how we as a society treat disasters. And so I learned a lot from that, basically.
When was that? Which year was that?
That was 2012.
2012. Okay, so correct. 11 years ago.
Yes, right. Yes. And so since then, in the wake of that disaster, I decided to launch Disaster Central. I think, with every business, whether it's a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, you address needs, simply needs.
Yeah.
And you look for big, hairy problems, and that was a big problem for a lot of survivors of that in the wake of that disaster.
Mm. Did they lack support from the government, or did they get any support at the?
There was a good deal of government support among major federal agencies, U.S. agencies, but there was also support from non-governmental organizations such as nonprofit organizations. And I just observed a lot of, there was a lot of good intentions, but the biggest challenge I saw was just a coordination among all agencies, not only the private sector and the public sector. And that really translated to meaningful recovery on the ground, so to speak. And so that's kind of what led to Disaster Central. It has a mission of, building better coordination among community stakeholders. But not only recovery, but we define a disaster as the preparation, navigating through a recovery, and then the long-term recovery. So there's really 3 distinct phases of any disaster. That we can do better, I think, as a public service to disaster survivors. We can better coordinate that.
So that's your main mission, to coordinate existing resources and agencies and government to kind of streamline the process of helping people to recover.
That's correct, and do that with the help of technology, because technology can offer a lot in that whole process and translate out to a much better end user experience, if you will. Okay, end user being the survivor. And so having a technology bent, I looked at ways of how that could be done better or performed better and better coordinated.
All right. So the basis of your service is some kind of technological framework. Is it an app or what is it exactly?
Yes, basically as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about the 3 phases of a disaster. The first phase being the preparedness, which can mitigate a lot of the impacts post-disaster. So being prepared, it sounds rather generic, but being better prepared can mitigate a lot of the issues that emerge from post-disaster. And we've pretty much centered in on people with access and functional needs. These are people who are deaf, reside in a wheelchair, and have to cope with special challenges related to navigating through a disaster and recovering from a disaster. So if we can focus on that particular aspect of the recovery and bringing in more community stakeholders in a coordinated effort, then the technology could play a very good role in that process, ushering in better, once again, coordination and recovery. So that said, we developed this the app called the Be Ready app. The app itself is an application which resides, of course, on an iPhone as well as a mobile device, any mobile device, iPad, and it's literally a preparedness plan in your pocket or your lap, and it walks you through features. The features themselves provide literally a step-by-step walkthrough of the of what it takes to not only prepare for a disaster and be ready for a disaster. So I won't go into a lot of the details of the features, but that's basically what purpose the app has.
And when disaster strikes, then the app also has some kind of emergency functionality, I guess.
Yes, basically there's one feature is the cloud-based vault, which secures and encrypts critical information. That could be medical information, that could be family contacts, that could be it could be pet information.
Mm-hmm.
It could, once again, your doctors, your veterinarians, your typically most first responders are friends and families.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
this is one area you can't really rely upon the government wholly to come
Mm-hmm.
and rescue you. But
Mm-hmm.
if your family members uh, are, uh, are are available, whether in state or out of state, they're in a better position to help you as a survivor recover from the disaster and navigate through a disaster. So that's
Yeah.
the idea behind it.
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are benefiting from this technology already. Did you have some kind of actual case happening, disasters happening, and your app like being in action during this disaster?
Yes, we uh, one case uh, in most recent disaster, Hurricane Ian, down in Florida. We have worked with a number of community members and getting the mobile app into their hands. And currently, we're working with the World Institute of Disabilities, and we're
Mm,
making the app much more accessible for people with functional access and functional needs.
mm,
So that's going into the second iteration of the app where it addresses these populations, and that's quite a sizable population. You know, people
mm,
who are not only access and functional needs, but people who are elderly, who are suffering with one form or fashion of a disability, a
mm.
pre-existing condition that needs to be communicated to medical practitioners.
All right, all right. Yeah, that sounds very useful, what you're doing, and very caring. So I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy the benefits, or even their lives will be saved by having this app in place rather than not having it. So I think that's a very impressive humanitarian service that you're offering here. But going back to Mr. John himself and his life journey, this is always like a big part of my podcast here. I would like to invite you to kind of travel back in time with me and look at John when he was a teenager, and have a look at what his life looked like and what was going on around him and in his mind.
Sure, sure. Well, to make a long story kind of short, basically, I was an at-risk youth. I was had gotten in trouble with the law at age 16, and
Oh,
I sort of uh, dealt with those implications. And it was was raised in a small town in Montana, and
mm,
have returned back to Montana from the East Coast where I was originally. And so basically, uh, I got involved with the wrong people, and
mm,
there was a lot of turmoil uh, in my upbringing. Uh, Again, not going into a lot of detail, but just a lot of alcohol and drug abuse. And
mm,
luckily, I did not. I managed to escape that cycle, the addictive nature of alcohol and drugs. And
mm,
I luckily found an out through sports, and that was through track.
mm,
And so I managed to propel myself out of that situation and managed to get some successes in track. I placed I ran the half mile and the mile, and I placed first in the state of Montana in 1973 in the half mile, and second in the state in the mile. So that was really a morale booster for me. It developed a lot of confidence, which I didn't have at the time. And from there, I was able to kind of turn my life around. And
Wow. So you were challenged at a very young age. Not exactly an easy teenage time, huh?
No, it wasn't. It was a dark time, and both mixed memories. And I'm just happy to be able to, based on the things that I did as a youth, happy to be able to live this long and make it to the ripe old age I am now. So
yeah, but I'm sure that there's a lot of more things came your way after you escaped from this dark phase, and you ended up a champion in sports, kinda. So what was the next step? What followed after that?
Well, the next step was was basically to go into a career to please my father. My father was a senior airline captain, and so it was only logical that I would follow in his footsteps, and I did so. I attended a 2-year technical school, and I learned to fly, and I achieved all my ratings through commercial pilot, and worked in that career. I achieved basically flew as a pilot for a commuter level regional carrier, and then at the age of roughly late 20s, I got out of that career when I realized that my only my only motive to get into that career was to please my father, and he was the type of person he couldn't be pleased. I'm sure there was I'm sure there was a part of him that was proud seeing me follow in his footsteps, but he wasn't able to show it, and then it turned out that I realized at that stage of the game, I realized that I was doing this only to get his to please him, and that led me to probably almost a nervous breakdown. So I got out of that career and then turned around and got into business, and from there, and have really had an entrepreneurial bent ever since.
Wow. I mean, flying airplanes doesn't sound too bad at first sight. It sounds like something. I mean, I had a dream to be a helicopter pilot when I was a teenager. It never came true, but I mean, flying helicopters or airplanes doesn't seem to be like the worst place to be in with your work. But I completely understand that sometimes what we do is just implanted in our heads from our parents, and we feel obliged, and it can be very tough to break free from that, and it can take a long time to realize that we're doing something just because we were told so, and not because we actually want it, right?
Yes, I think I came to the conclusion that there's two types of pilots: one that flies to live, and the other that lives to fly. And I was the pilot who basically flew to live, and it just didn't agree with my constitution, who I was as a person, and not that I didn't have good memories, and the profession had a great deal of accolades, but it wasn't me. I had to come back to who I was as a person.
And who was that? Who was the real John?
I think I'm truly an entrepreneur. I see myself as that. I love to create things and see them come to fruition and work with
Welcome to the
other
club.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Yes. Yes.
But then we need, I mean, the entrepreneurial part is kind of a framework, but then the content, I mean, the business nature, the passion that we bring into this journey, what was it? What did you want to create? What was your first business?
Well, I started out and I launched an organization. This was a for-profit organization. This time it's called Virtual Capital Group. And Virtual Capital Group was basically, at that time, crowdfunding was nascent. It was just beginning. The whole concept of crowdfunding, and the federal regulators here in the States really didn't have legal frameworks to accommodate crowdfunding, the concept of crowdfunding. So I wrote a book called Web-Based Venture Money, and one of my excursions to the East Coast, I worked for a Wall Street firm called D.H. Blair. At the time, they were one of the top IPO underwriting houses in New York City. And I learned a lot about corporate finance, and later broke out on my own and began Virtual Capital Group and consulted with a lot of entrepreneurs and bringing ideas into fruition.
Oh, so your first venture was to write a book about crowdfunding, which requires quite a bit of experience with crowdfunding, huh?
Yes.
So it doesn't come easy, I guess, to become an authority in this on this topic.
No, especially with the legal frameworks as they were in the 1990s. The whole concept of there was really no provision for profit-based crowdfunding, and we have the we funders of today, and so the book was about pioneering basically that regulatory framework through what we refer to as direct public offerings, and which later became what is known as the crowdfunding exemption with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the book taught people, how to form capital for their small business using that exemption, that Regulation D exemption, which is under the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934 and 33. So
that's kind of the opposite side of the planet, right? I mean, first you're flying planes and then you write a book about crowdfunding. I mean, that is a real stretch, man. But yeah, I appreciate that, how you kind of completely changed ways and went into the crowdfunding business. And you wrote the book, and was it working? Was it selling well? Did it get some response?
It basically 500 copies. I can't say the book was a huge success because it was such an early time frame for the crowdfunding regulations, and the SEC, the regulations weren't really quite there yet, and there was this whole issue of what is called a broker-dealer registration, and so I was sort of betwixt in between and whether to promote this style of capital formation because the SEC really hadn't really endorsed it quite yet. I had attended a lot of forums with the SEC in the 1990s, and they weren't quite there yet. So until the actual regulation came about, it wasn't a great space to be in because you really had to watch behind your back. So it was a little too leading edge at the time, but so that led me to really throttle back a little bit on the promotion of the book, so to speak.
Okay. And I'm sure this book writing venture led you to something else along the way, or did you keep writing books, or did you change gears from there?
Well, I the book was intended to be really, posturing myself as an expert in this field, which it did,
Mhm. All right.
and so I did get some recognition there. But uh, once again, it was the entrepreneurial. I'd worked with many entrepreneurs through the years and helped raise millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, Using the Reg D 504 exemption, which is the statutory framework for
Mm-hmm.
that. And but I still had that hankering to be an entrepreneur myself, and that's what sort of led me to Disaster Central. And I
Mm-hmm.
already had a background in technology, working as a pilot, and I was
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with technology, and um, so that kind of led me. And then that experience, on the East Coast with Hurricane Sandy, really led me to where I am now,
Mm.
developing a mobile app, kind of being the chief developer of the mobile app.
Oh, so you're even technically involved in this development, and you actually uh, not just the founder, but also the developer of this mobile app.
Yes, chief developer, uh, chief cook, and bottle washer, as they say. Uh, I had very specific uh, technical specifications, and there was no one who knew that better than I did. So
Hmm.
um, uh,
Hmm.
I played the role of business analyst or chief
Hmm.
developer, on the mobile app.
Wow, that is quite
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah,
So you went from pilot to author to mobile app developer. I mean,
correct.
these are, and before pilot, you also, made quite a life-changing shift from, from your teenage time to being a sports, being athlete. So a lot of changes happened, huh, in your life. A lot of, and it takes a very open, and it takes a lot of courage to go through all these changes and take, to change paths so many times.
Yes, it was a burning desire, and uh, I always was a believer in following your bliss, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the very nature of being an entrepreneur. Is you pursue a dream, and you doggedly stick to the idea, the concept, until it comes to fruition, and you don't quit. You simply don't quit.
Yep, I hear this a lot, man, and it's just because it's true. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's just such an essential part of entrepreneurship to, to just stick with it and to keep going and not quit. When shit hits the fan. But yeah, um, but yeah, I think it's a. Thank you for sharing this.
Mhm.
One question that came to me was, um, how would you say you discover this true purpose that did drive you to these different directions? Uh, how do you kind of realize, or how do you know what it is you really want to do?
I think it comes from the idea that basically, what would you ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't getting paid for it?
Hmm.
And that to
That's a good
me
one.
was the real acid test, if you will, or the real vetting
Hmm.
question, is that what would
Wow.
you be doing with your life if you weren't getting paid? And that
Hmm.
would be the right career for you. Because obviously we want to get paid for what we do. But
Hmm.
if you're willing to do it without pay, that tells me there's a pretty strong impetus within you that
Hmm.
um, that drives that'll stay with you during those times of ebb and flow, if you will, of
Hmm. Hmm.
the good times and the bad times, which are inevitably will come about for any
Yeah, yeah.
entrepreneur.
I think that is fantastic advice. Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, would I do this if I didn't get paid? Yeah, and
Exactly.
yeah, that's a really good test to your mission and to what you really want to do with your life or not.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. Thanks for sharing this, John.
Mm-hmm.
I like to always to ask these questions about, what do you think? What is the biggest challenge that you are facing or you have been facing as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think you know probably staying motivated and um, maintaining the vision.
Hmm.
And so I think it's the key part of it is to understand that there'll be people who come into your lives who help you along your path, uh, and there'll be other people who are well intentioned, but they wouldn't be the right people for your to help you usher you along on your vision. They're sort of the naysayers,
Hmm.
and so this is an inner game. Entrepreneurship is an inner game, and it's about keeping yourself motivated and having external forces out there that that maybe are encouraging you, are naysayers, are probably the wrong people in your life. So it's really managing the people component in your life as well.
Yep.
And so we're looking for this great big mastermind of people who are sympathetic to you and what you're trying to accomplish. And they're out there. Inevitably, you will find them on your journey. So it's managing that people component as well, since it's an
Hmm.
inner game,
Hmm.
like sports, like track. It's an inner
Hmm.
game. It's a lot of part of running or distance running is the inner game and psychologically convincing yourself that you know that you can do this
Hmm. Hmm.
and surrounding yourself with people who support that.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. To surround yourself with the right people who understand and support you and your true mission, and who are, yeah, and not the naysayers and the people who have all the doubts and concerns and all the worries. Yeah, that can be quite demolishing and hindering. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the right network, the right people, to find those is the biggest challenge. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of the big challenges.
And the
And
right
if
expertise.
today, and the right expertise, yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Yeah. To talk to those who have done it before, maybe
Exactly.
uh, what you're trying to do. And yes, this is something really essential. And my last question would be, I mean, which is kind of a consequence of the previous one. So, if somebody wanted to start his entrepreneurial journey today, what would be your best advice to this person?
Don't quit.
Right?
Persistence.
Yeah.
Persistence is like carbon to steel.
Mm.
It's that's the single greatest quality I think an entrepreneur should possess.
Hmm. All right.
The idea is one thing, and the idea may iterate, it may change, it may evolve, but it's persistence that always will be there. You and the idea, and so that would be the single greatest thing I could share.
Hmm. Yeah. I agree. Persistence is essential, but we also need to know when we are on the wrong track, right? So persistence needs to be smart in a way as well. So we cannot kind of keep on banging our head against the wall if it's just, there must be a point also to say like, okay, this is not working. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to throw it away completely, but there must be also, I think, a part of like adjusting our direction and our path, like which way we want to go. So I think persistence is really important, but it also has to be smart at some point. I mean, when it doesn't work at all, I think we have to, we have to find a better way.
Exactly.
We have to reconsider what we're doing.
Part of that is also listening to the universe, because the universe is going to give us that feedback. It's going to tell us. A big one. It's going to tell us whether we're on the right track or not. And absolutely, if we're beating our head against the wall, then it's time to change course. I guess what I would submit is that constitutionally, there's something within us that we came upon this earth for a purpose, and the longest journey is to really find that purpose. But yes, you're absolutely correct. I believe that as well. I think you need feedback, and but again, you look at people like Thomas Edison. I mean, it was 15,000 times he invented the light bulb, but until he arrived at his, the magic sauce, the secret formula.
Yeah. I mean, that's the magical part. I mean, this black tunnel of not getting there and not succeeding can be really daunting and can be really long. And this is, I think, where we are like really on our own in a way, where we have to find this inner voice, or where our heart has to tell us, is this worth pursuing, or am I just like beating a dead horse here? And I guess Thomas Edison had still, after 14,000 times, he still had this inner voice telling him, keep going. So, and that is somehow like a spiritual thing, I guess, which cannot really be explained and analyzed. But yeah, I think this is what we need to feel this drive to keep going.
Yes, and I'd add to that, it's really about looking for parades, marching parades, and getting in front of them too, and that's part of the process of being an entrepreneur. To look for trends, look for the universe is going to give you that feedback, and it's going to be obvious, and so you don't have to create the parade, but you can get in front of the parade and start marching with them, enjoying the benefits of the parade, so to speak. In that momentum.
Yeah, like artificial intelligence is a big time parade right now. So and there's a lot of marching going on.
Absolutely, and I'm a big crypto fan too. I think that's blockchain technology is going to play a big role in the future.
Yeah,
it has its fits and starts right now, but I think there's technology. If we look at the technology field in general, I think those are two ripe areas: AI and blockchain.
Blockchain, yeah, I agree. Fantastic, John. Lots of words of wisdom here. I would like to thank you so much for sharing your life story and your insights and your advice for entrepreneurs who are on the way to getting where you are. And it was a great pleasure to have you on my podcast. Anything you would like to add, and anything you would like people to reach out to, any links, contact details, I will put it in the description below this video, so people can always kind of contact you and find you, and maybe also find the app that you have created, which I'm sure will serve a lot of humans And yeah, thanks again. We stay in touch, and you have a good day.
You too, Dano, and they can reach me at disastercentral.org and John at disastercentral.org if they want to reach out.
Cool. I will include that in the description. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you, Dano. My pleasure.
Yes, bye-bye. Yep.
Bye-bye.